The Waukesha Board of Education Teaching and Learning Committee meeting. Can I first verify that the meeting has been properly posted?
Yes.
Thank you. Get everybody here tonight. All right, we will begin looking for approval of the teaching and learning minutes from our April 3rd meeting.
I move to approve the April 3rd teaching and learning minutes as presented.
Thank you.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Brooks. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. We have an opportunity for public comment. Did anyone sign up to speak?
No.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to our first general business, a new topic for tonight, which is discussion and possible action on a new board policy 5411, which addresses the third grade promotion and retention requirement under the Act 20.
Good evening. So tonight, Melissa Yao is joining me. What we wanted to do tonight was bring forward the potential new policy for discussion and possible action. This will be the first time that we're discussing it, so there may be several questions, but we're prepared to kind of walk through the work that we've done. As you know, as part of Act 20, we've had a lot of work done so far in the district, and we'll continue to work on that. One of the pieces the law requires is for us to have a policy around promotion and retention for students in 3rd to 4th grade. So what we are presenting tonight is a new policy. It's not a revision of a current policy. What we are bringing forward tonight has been shared has been started from what DPI provided, and then Neola took what the model from DPI as well as their own legal guidance to bring forward what we have tonight to discuss. Within that, our own team had an additional meeting with Neola since this was a new policy and not part of our regular quarterly review. Our meeting was really just to better understand the language and some of the rationale between some of the word choices. What we did then is we made a few slight adjustments, basically, and we'll highlight them, but really talking about condensing or streamlining some of the language in certain sections. So we'll go through that. But tonight, what we wanted to do was just talk about the policy and speak to, the why for each section, and Melissa will give more detail to each of the sections. We do have some choices, and Melissa will highlight specific choices we have in her recommendation that we're bringing forward around when this would go into effect.
All right, good evening. So as Jen said, the why of this policy is because it's part of the law of Act 20 that there needs to be a policy approved by the school district board around promotion and retention for our 3rd graders to 4th grade. So it's really just zoning in on that grade level. So this policy only relates to that grade. We would be asking that this policy go into effect September 1st of 2027. That allows our current kindergartners, they would be in 3rd grade when this would take place. So that means they would have 3 years under our updated way of teaching to that structured literacy aligned to science of reading, which hopefully we'll continue on our trajectory of moving more students to proficiency. So we would have a lot less students that we would have to take through this consideration of looking at retention or promotion for these students.
And that is actually the latest possible date. With the policy itself, we are looking to have that approved much sooner. So wanting a policy in place by July to meet those standards for the law.
Yeah, but the policy it has to be approved by July, but it would, we're asking that it would not take effect until September 1st of 2027. So that's kind of weird that you would approve it, but that's in the law that we have to have something approved by then. But the law states that you can determine when the policy would take action, and that's when we're wanting September 1st of 2027.
Can I clarify? And I'm
Yes.
going to interrupt your presentation. If I understand correctly, Act 20 also requires that the policy does become effective at the latest September 1st, 2027.
Correct.
And I have a clarifying question on that. Does that mean that retention or promotion decisions will be made that affect students who begin the fourth grade that year? Or does the effective date of the policy mean that the 27-28 school year is the year at the end of which those decisions will be made? Do you
Correct.
understand what I'm asking?
When our current kindergartners would be third graders, it would be this time of year that we would be making those decisions for going into fourth grade and going through this policy with those students.
So those decisions would be at the end, they would be third graders, so it'd be the end of the 27-28 school year when
Correct.
those decisions are made?
Correct. And so part of the promotion and what we would be looking at is there would be 4 options. One, and these options would be made with a school team and the parents of the student. And what you would be doing is looking at what all has happened for that student. So looking at, has quality universal instruction taken place? Has the student had a reading plan that outlines the interventions and support? How did the student respond to that? So we'd be looking at that progress monitoring data to see, what were the impacts of that. We'd also, of course, be looking at research around, there's a lot of research out there around retention and what later impacts that has on students with dropouts. So we would consider all those things with the parents. And we would be deciding then on 4 options. One would be promotion to fourth grade with supports and services that would be more appropriate than retention. Another option would be that promotion, and we would consider they were promoting, but the reason that they didn't pass their plan wasn't due to the student's lack of reading. So maybe there's another mitigating factor, which might be a student's language, which are some pieces that we have in the first part of the policy where you're looking at students with like limited English or something like that. That might be a factor there. Another option would be promotion, where the parents are not in agreement of retention. And then the fourth option would be retention, that the parents and the school feel like the best option for the student to continue learning might be retention. If we do promote a student, what would go into effect is that they would have to have intensive summer school. And so we would be offering intensive summer school, and the student would also continue to have intervening services and support. So we would continue to intervene with that student because our ultimate goal, whether there's retention or promotion, is that our students, that we are closing the gap and that they are meeting expectations of proficiency. So that would still maintain the goal of any student who we would promote. They would continue to receive those services. And we would be doing this practice through problem-solving teams. So we currently call those PST teams. So we have teams that get together and talk about how are we intervening, what supports are students needing. We involve the parents in that. So we would be putting together a protocol handbook for our schools to be using that on when do these discussions need to start. So we'd be starting even earlier than the last assessment. So when students in third grade, are going on to a reading plan at the beginning of the year, we would start these conversations of, notifying parents this could happen. Of course, here's we have the reading plan, and working with the team from the very, very start. Because of course, our goal is we don't want a student to have to be in a place where we have to even use this policy. So we're always trying to be proactive with that. And we don't want to blindside our families as well. Questions?
Mr. Zenobia?
Thank you. So, there's an awful lot here, but my first question is, and maybe not for reading, obviously, but how many students do we currently retain now under, third grade and below? I mean, how often does that happen? Do we even know a percentage?
How often
or-
do we retain
Yeah, do we
currently?
hold someone back?
Rarely.
Rarely.
I don't know of anyone last year.
Yeah. And I would think that'd be the goal, but, I guess my concern is, I think this policy covers a lot of options pretty well. I think there's a lot of unknowns that it's just going to have to kind of go with the flow here to see what happens. But given the fact that we know there are, I don't want to say a significant number, but overall, generally speaking, a number of students that are not at grade level reading, just generally in the population of the system, public school system. What do we think is a conservative number of students that may need this plan, and percentage-wise, or what are we thinking? Do we know?
Yes, I do know. I should have brought because I was trying to save for my June presentation to share with you the numbers and some excitement there. But we probably have at third grade right now across the district around 100 students still at third grade. Part of it is we're still waiting. For third grade, you have to have two variables. You have to meet the requirements of your reading plan, and part of that is you have to be above the 25th percentile in the oral reading fluency, and then meet the what is outlined for where we're intervening and that you're making progress to those goals. And then the second factor that we're waiting on is you also have to be meeting on the forward assessment. And so we're waiting on those results. The state has said we're going to have those by the end of May this year, so we will see. So we have some students who they met the requirements of their third grade reading plan, but they can't get off of their plan because we have to wait to see if they've met that second part then of passing or meeting expectations on the forward.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Kozlowski?
Thanks. I want to kind of add on to what Mr. Zenobia was getting at with the numbers. So roughly today's world could potentially be that 100 students would be held back. And it's an interesting conversation because I was recently talking about how many students just as in the district do we hold back. So if you fail all of your classes, do we hold you back? And the answer was no, they progress through the grades. Now they are ineligible to graduate, but for a whole bunch of reasons, right, keeping them with the same class we could go on.
Right.
It's just interesting in this case then that we're picking that out. So let's say that they are meeting expectations in other core areas such as the maths, the sciences and whatnot, and for whatever reason are struggling just in reading. Would we hold them back? Based on the law or what we're trying to propose here, we would say potentially.
Most likely, then, we would choose one of those, on the second page of the policy, we would choose one of those A, B, or C options that we would promote, but what we would be doing instead of just passing along, within that promotion, you're still we want the students to go to summer school for intensive summer school. We will still be making sure that they have a intervention and support. So we are continuing to provide additional services because the ultimate goal is we want them to meet the requirements of the third grade plan, because if they didn't meet those parts, we still want them to meet those goals. And then we're wanting them to be able then to meet the state assessment, because if we promote a student, the goal, of course, then the next year would be that they have met the goals of that plan, and then that they would pass the reading portion of the state assessment. And this would then continue on for that student in 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, until they come off. So this ultimately could, for a student, follow them all the way up. Or you could have a student who might be in a situation where we retain them, and then the next year, they don't pass we retain them in 3rd grade, and they still don't pass the forward, which there can be many reasons for that. Sometimes it might be because the child truly is not a proficient, or sometimes it could be test taking, nervous things. There could be lots of factors within that.
Yeah, I agree. This is scary on a lot of levels, and I think that as a parent, I don't even know. I'm hesitant to hold back, then put in parameters to uplift.
Yeah. And that's why I feel like this policy and going through it, where you have all of those options, and we have a process of the team meeting together with the parents, looking at the plan, what services have been provided, considering what else would be provided to the student if we promoted them, gives that option of providing the services and intervening, which is really what we want for the student, right, to close the gap. And that maybe in a few cases, retention might be the best option, but I'm not sure it would be the best option for as many students who might be
I agree.
in that
I worry
boat
about
at
their
this time.
well-being. I worry about what that will do to them
Yes.
to be held back and
Yeah.
watch their peers move on, and I just,
Yeah, there's a lot of research out on that.
so I would like our approach to be, we're going to do whatever it means to uplift and promote and build around them.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Brooks?
Thank you, and thank you for all the work that you're doing to help implement Act 20 here. It's obviously something that's very personal and near and dear to me, but I know it's a lot of work that we put on our professionals, and you guys are just rising to the occasion. I have no issue with the effect date, September 1st, 2027. That makes sense, making sure that our students who are, ideally if these curriculum changes and the strategies are working, which we believe they will, you're going to have fewer kids by the time they reach that point. So it's not going to be as overwhelming to the system where all of a sudden, that was the fear with the retention piece in the beginning was,
Right.
oh my God, we're going to have 100 kids that we're holding back. Our class sizes are going to balloon. Teachers aren't going to know how to navigate all these extra kids that they have to keep. For folks who followed the Act 20 debate, the retention piece was the biggest controversy. DPI is very, very anti-retention. You had some folks who were supporting the bill who, that was kind of their line in the sand. Then you had a lot of people in the middle who were movable. I certainly understand the perspective of you don't want to alienate a student from, seeing their peers move on, but they don't, and the mentality that, just the stigma around the lack of social promotion. But at the same time, sure, you might make that kid feel bad in that moment, but they're going to feel even worse when they're in 9th grade and they're reading at a 2nd grade reading level, and we're not able to fix that. I don't think just passing kids along is the solution either. But one thing that when we were having the discussion around retention with DPI during the crafting of the bill, one of the ideas, and Ms. Kozlowski kind of touched on this, if a kid's doing well in a lot of other subjects, but reading is really the thing that they're struggling with, what, in your opinion, would be the feasibility of doing, like, rather than grade level retention, subject level retention, where they still get socially promoted, they're with their peers, but then maybe for reading they get pulled out into 3rd grade reading instruction and they go to that class for that? Because there have been schools where I've been at where a kid is excelling in a subject and they go up to 4th grade for math. I feel like we could pull out for, take them down to 3rd grade for reading, but obviously you have to jostle schedules and class loads and things like that. But how do you think that's feasible in our school district, or is that just kind of better in theory than it would be in practice?
I feel more in theory, because what would happen for a student who doesn't meet this and we decide promotion is the best policy, many times, when people sometimes hear literacy, it seems like it's just one thing.
Right.
But, there's 9 areas that we have to, intervene in and teach on. And so sometimes for some students, they might be really strong in the area of, their listening comprehension, and their comprehension is really up there, but they might be still struggling in the area of phonics. And so we need to really come in and do a lot with morphology and really understanding how words work. It might be they might have some holes in phonemic awareness and learning how words work together. So I think one of the best things that we can do is really pinpoint where are those gaps and holes, and then through our universal being able to do repetitive small groups with them, add on that additional layer of intervention. And we have at elementary created our day where we, at all buildings, have a 30-minute intervention and enrichment time where we're not teaching anything at the universal. It is intervening or accelerating for students on what they need. And so we would have that time to be able to really go in and fill the gaps with wherever they are at on that continuum.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Mrs. Koenig?
Thank you, Ms. Yao. This is a lot of work and a huge undertaking, and I really appreciate the time you've already been put into this and will put into this. You touched on something you just mentioned when it comes to literacy, and there are just so many parts and 9 different components. That would make it difficult for a student to be promoted in other areas and yet, receive training in a lower level, only because literacy is so involved in all the content areas. And so if they're struggling, they're going to continue to struggle as they get into that higher level science, social studies, where comprehension and, is so critical when you do those longer readings. So I can see that this would affect them moving, through the system in all academic areas. I just had a question regarding the grade level, the kindergartner group of this year. At this point, how much have the parents been shared with regard to what's coming, knowing that this group of kindergartners is going to be that first, pilot group, if you will, that's going to have to face this? Has anything gone out yet? And if so, or will it be going out soon so that they're aware that this is coming?
Right. Great question. We haven't done any communication yet around the potential of this policy. But once it is, we would put together a communication information on our website about that piece.
Parents have received information about how their student is doing and progressing on the testing and progress monitoring. We just haven't linked it directly to
this.
in 3 years, this specific policy.
They've gotten a lot of communication, they've written a lot of letters this year.
Did you have something else? Anybody else? I've kind of enjoyed digging into all of this because this is kind of where the rubber meets the road, right? Like, what are we going to do about it? So I think, we have a law because elementary literacy is definitely a problem.
Yep.
Looking at our forward exam scores, even with the free bump that we got from the DPI this year, it is concerning. If one of the minimum requirements is that you have to meet expectations on the forward exam, I am surprised that there's only 100.
I mean, it's probably more than, I can get my computer and tell you the numbers, or you can wait. Do you want me to tell you the
I
numbers?
can wait.
The
How many
number
third graders do we have?
I just want to clarify, the number 100, or the estimate, is, those are the number of students who have a reading plan right
correct.
now,
Yeah.
and we don't know their forward results. Melissa's been working with all the principals to monitor how many students had one in winter, and then now the second round of testing in spring here. So, but just to clarify that.
Right. How many third graders do we have? I'm thinking 700 or 800.
Can I get my computer? 'Cause
No, you can come back.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
It's
I'm sorry.
It's a minor question,
Yeah.
but it's even given that we have 10,000 kids in the district and about half of them are in elementary.
Yeah, I was about to say, it's,
Okay, 700. And our forward exam reading proficiency was 54%, and that's the enhanced result. So I think there's a few things here, right? Do we have strong universal instruction? Yes, we invested in an excellent program. We've had phonics in place for several years now. We're putting the entire benchmark system in place. Every school, every child at every school is receiving the same experience. Teachers are well-trained in the product. So we've done that. And then this is about what are the layers of support and the layers of intervention. And is there enough time to work through all of this before we have to make a decision? From everything that I'm seeing too, even including the various model policies, someone could make a decision in first grade or second grade to say, we need a little extra time, and where you're not staring down that super high stakes decision, but it may be more appropriate early on in the learning process. And so
and
that
we
comes
have,
up a lot.
we still have our current district policy around retention that's for all, where this policy is just focused on that third to fourth grade promotion. So we do have a policy and practice around promotion at any time currently. And I would say maybe there's average would probably be one student a year that, gets retained that I know about, because part of the policy is that principals have that decision and they always call and consult, and we make sure, okay, what all have you done? It can't just be, oh my goodness, now we want to retain. There can be lots of reasons why people want to do that. There's reclassifying for sports. There's lots of different reasons why things can happen, and we want to make sure that we're really looking and considering all variables with the family. The family has to be a part of that.
I think the important part too is that if there is a decision to promote a student who hasn't completed the plan and isn't testing at meeting expectations, the system of supports must continue.
Must.
Until they hit that target. So that's
Absolutely.
really important. As well as the summer pieces, which we don't have to really get into that tonight, but I think too, we'll learn with that, like what is that going to look like? What's going to be the demand on the summer intensives? One thing I would say just from a policy perspective, I guess my take, and maybe I'm being too critical, but I think the order of things in the policy just makes it more complicated than it needs to be. I think it would benefit from a little bit of a decision tree flowchart kind of thing, because it starts with, are you testing at grade level? Yes or no? Do you have a good cause exemption? Yes or no? And if it's no and no, that's when all of these decision pieces kind of come into place. And so I think that could help simplify and also take away some of the anxiety and fear for parents who are trying to work through some of this, because there are certain conditions where it's like, well, we've been through this process. Maybe there was a consideration of a retention. Maybe there's been a plan in place for several years. Maybe there's a student that can't take the test, those kinds of things. So I think if we could kind of start with, what are those minimum requirements? And then when we get to that point, it's like, okay, well now, what are the options that we have to work through all that we know about the student, the people who work with the student the most closely, the parents included, and then how do we make the decision that's in the best interest of the student, and then make sure they have the supports in place to be successful.
Right. Would you want that to be a part of the policy? Some of that is in the procedural handbook that we're putting together that schools would use with their families. That's typically the administrative guidelines that gets into like, how do we now put the policy into action?
Yeah, the policy doesn't have to have an illustration, but I think the order of things is important, and kind of starting with, promotion is appropriate when these are met, and then, when it's not, and then what exceptions do we have, or what pathways do we have available to us? So I think the content is there. And then I think the pieces about language probably need to be enhanced a little bit, just because of our dual language program and that we're going to find different types of situations. And it may not be that we need more policy language, but I think we need really clear guidance on how that's going to work.
This is really good conversation. Obviously, we're both taking notes and we'll work on some of these pieces. When we did meet with Neola, they shared that they anticipate revisions of the policy coming forward between now and September 1st of 2027. So of course, if any of those come forward, we'll bring those, to this group. But we can work on some of those edits between now and the next time we come back.
So we are required to at least pass the policy this summer.
By July.
So that would mean that we need to have this back in June.
we're coming
It's
back in
Something that
June.
we
Yeah.
could possibly take some action on.
Yeah, possibly in June if we need to in July. And then after that, if any revisions come forward or things change, we would then bring it back over time.
And, so it's the end of July, July 31st.
It's the beginning of July,
It's which?
Yeah.
July 1st.
Yes. So, yeah, we won't be able to bring it.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, I don't have anything further. Does anybody else? So I guess we're probably, obviously not ready to take action, but we would need to do something in June. Yeah,
Yeah, and we're scheduled to come back next month.
thank you. I would say if committee members have specific questions that they didn't think of tonight or didn't get addressed, make sure you pass those on to administration, and then we'll be well prepared next month. Okay,
Awesome.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're moving into our content areas, and first we'll be talking about discussion and possible action on approval of the AP Econ resource under social studies category. So we have Mrs. Ryan,
Yeah, so
Mr. Millard.
as you know, over the last several years, we offer a variety of AP classes. The high school team is back to talk about our econ resource. I do want to mention too that one of the things that has brought us forward with several AP classes this year is Laura Ryan's work around establishing a timeline for review and revisions of curriculum resources specific to AP classes. So if it feels like we've been here several times talking about AP classes, we have, but this is just the next one in the work that we've been doing. So Laura Ryan and the team will talk about the work that's been done, and we'll take it from there as far as discussions and possible action on the resource.
Good evening. So we are back tonight, and joining me is Amy Antirano, Social Studies and ELA Coordinator, and Carl Millard, Social Studies Teacher at Waukesha West. If you remember, it seems like a very long time ago, but 2 months ago, I think we were here the first time, and we came in March to begin the discussion and present the information around renewing and updating a curricular resource for AP Econ. So last time we were here, just a quick review. Here's some of the information that we did go over. In SDW, we have been teaching AP Econ since 2006. The current year of the textbook, and we are now using the same textbook, just an older version, is 2018 of the economics for the AP course. Over the last couple of years, there have been a few minor changes to the AP Econ test, and it actually went digital for the first time this year. A reminder that we offer macro and micro econ as a year-long course. And so in May, students can choose to take one, just the macro, just the micro, or both tests. And in fact, I think they just took, which one, Monday?
Just took micro yesterday, and macro's coming up this Friday, and preliminary feedback from students positive, so that's encouraging.
And this was the first time that it was digital, and I didn't talk to any econ students, but I talked to others, and they really liked the digital format. We also presented the 5-year data that you see here. And as you can see, and if you had time to preview and peruse the textbook, you can see that this is a challenging content area, which is why our enrollment is probably a little lower than some of our other AP courses. This year, both West and South had one section of AP Micro and Macro Econ running. And next year, all 3 high schools, well, actually 4, and eAchieve, will have an AP Econ course running. So currently, again, we are using this Econ textbook. However, we only have access to the hard copy at this point. And so the team has been investigating the updated version of the Krugman's Econ and how we would implement the digital as well as the hard copy for next year's students.
All right, so what you'll see here are a couple of snapshots of different components from in the textbook. So students have access to, or will have access to, both the physical textbook and also the digital resource. The benefit here of this updated version is the alignment with the AP test and the ample test practice. So you'll see these different tools, including deconstruction of the FRQ, which for students taking multiple AP courses is certainly different than in others. So it will break down the points and how a student would earn points specifically for micro and or macro. It will also talk about and provide some checks for understanding along with multiple choice practice, some test taking tips, and also some practice tests. So students have access to this through the textbook, through the digital platform, which means not only in class but at home. So it can become some more of that independent practice as they're reading, as they're completing assignments, and ultimately preparing them for those common experiences, which are the common assessments built from the questions in the test bank of AP Classroom.
If I could just jump in along the same lines with both slide 3 and slide 4. There's an old expression in the world of triathlon, which I used to do before I got a bad knee, race with what you train with. And one of the things that I like about this resource is the structure is the same type of structure as on the AP test. The multiple choice questions are structured very similarly. The scoring information, so on slide 3 it says AP exam practice, including digital textbook, that in the upper left. That breakdown for how you earn points is identical. And so that's really great practice for the kids. Going to slide 4, so the team, myself and the gentleman from North and South have been working on building common assessments. That work is going to be continuing, and it's really nice. It's the first time, I think, in my career here that we're going to have common AP economics assessments, which is really exciting. But it's a lot of work. So to encourage that lift and facilitate that, I appreciate the time that we've been given and look forward to more of that. But so there we have a test. I believe that's from Mr. Horn at North. That's the structure, right? So we'd be looking at.
You should have a copy also of the course outline that the team has been working on. Really, AP outlines the units for them, but they've been talking about what percentage of their time would they be spending on them, what are the main targets that they would be hitting. That is the work that they're continuing to do the summatives and the multiple choice tests and trying to make some of that summative along the way. Anything else you want to add to that?
Well, yeah, and thank you. Appreciate that. Let's see. I'm just opening up. I'm sorry. So on the course outline, one of the things that we did as a team is you'll notice we have 6 units for micro, 6 units for macro, because that's exactly the breakdown in AP Classroom. So as we work to build those assessments, we're pulling off AP Classroom. That's going to be the primary source that we use because that's the best material. That is the most authentic to the experience in May.
All right, before we talk cost, I also just wanted to dovetail on what was noted there. One of the other pieces in terms of building that, the course outline has really been looking at what specific topics need to be covered. And in some cases, when I was here and we were talking about psychology, it was really a cover to cover, every bit of this needs to be delved into. And so it's been a time for teachers who've been working a little bit in isolation to really have conversations about what topics and how much time is reasonable, considering we have micro and macro to cover. So it really is aligning the experience and the content simultaneously. So if we shift to talking about the cost and implementation specifically, what Mr. Millard referred to earlier is that district PLC time, where we've been using to build those common assessments, to review the updated textbook. We'll continue that process. And then as part of that, what we are hoping to do, what we're recommending is to take the bundled approach for the curriculum. So what that means is that we would have physical textbooks for students to use along with digital access. We have a 4 and a 7-year quote. We do not have a 9-year quote because the textbook would need to go into a new edition of publication based on the current publication date. So the 4 and the 7-year account for 75 physical texts along with the digital access. The benefit of the 7-year obviously is the time with it. The 4-year, we have a slightly lower cost for the digital. The physical textbooks don't change depending on the 4 or 7-year adoption. The difference in cost really comes down to the cost of the digital access. It goes from $30 per use or per student basically to $49 between the years.
In addition, there won't be much cost for professional development plan as the team is already meeting. They have some common time, and we'll have more common time built into the day next year to work on this. And then we have some days during August in our summer institute that they will be continuing to work on this. So they really have a nice head start on this. So that brings us to the end, and we are open to any discussion and questions.
Mrs. Koenig?
Awesome, thank you. I love the way this team collaborates and just, pulls these things together and just enjoys that time together. You guys are making such huge gains, and I love this. The text was wonderful. I turned mine in, but I did enjoy that text. I thought it was very, very thorough. I think I remember hearing there were changes made to the test last year, correct? To the actual exams, micro and macro. There were changes made,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
And that textbook reflects those changes. In other words, it goes along with that, correct?
Yes. So the principal change in content is a macro piece, and it has to do with monetary policy. We've been living it since 2008 in a world with ample reserves, thanks to the extreme pumping of dollars into banks by the Federal Reserve. And the AP world hadn't adjusted to that for the longest time, and now they have. So it'll be good to have that reflected in our text.
Right, and that's super important. Just one more other question. Looking at the difference between the two costs, is there any talk of revamping the test again and within the next, 7 years or so? I mean, I'm sure that can happen, but if not, I'm looking at the cost, and we're looking about a $1,500 difference, correct? From 4-year to 7-year? Okay, which doesn't seem...
Most of the AP courses say that you can have a book for 10 years. So even if they did make minor changes, which is what happened last time, we could still continue with the same book. And keep in mind that they use AP College Board, my classroom. So that would keep us updated on any changes or anything, even if we had a book for 7 years.
Got it, okay. 'Cause it just doesn't seem like that much of a.
It really
a
isn't.
Jump in price.
It's like it'd be
So
crazy for us
It's almost a no-brainer if
Right,
you're going to
right.
do this, to just take the 7-year plan. Okay, awesome, thank you.
Mrs. Kozlowski?
I obviously thought it was great, so I'm actually gonna keep the book for a bit and walk through the course outline. I think the
yours.
course outline looks great, and don't get me wrong, I just am interested in the topic. And based on that, I would motion to approve Krugman's economics for the AP courses presented.
Second.
I have some questions, but thank you. Moved and seconded. I would like to just add a couple things to the discussion if I could. Aside from the fact that there's only 4 pages dedicated to tariffs, and I think 4 to the high-level Fed, like, which seems like a miss to me because everything in macro kind of matters in that space.
Yes.
But I think it's more about understanding the supply-demand curve and how that evolves over the curriculum, which I think we have a lot of expertise in our teaching staff on that. But I think, being able to, in the absence of that expertise, being able to replicate that is important. So I don't necessarily know that the book itself has 7 years of runway in it. I feel like there's a lot that's changed. I'm not an economist by training. I'm kind of an amateur economist, like we all need to be these days. But I just don't know that there's 7 years of runway. I'm curious, Mr. Millard, what you think about that, and then I have a follow-up question to that.
I appreciate your remarks. To that point, it's true, a lot of textbooks might emphasize different areas. And we've seen that with other books as we've looked in prior editions of this, we've looked at others as well. If I could build on that, supply side economics from the 1980s. It just gets cursory mentioned and that's all you're gonna get. And that's how you're gonna get in a lot of the books. And so that's hard. I think that's where having staff that can fill some of those pieces in as we look at AP alignment, that we add what makes sense so that the kids are ready for the test. The AP College Board doesn't talk about those pieces that much, those topics that we just mentioned here tonight. Tariffs do come up, oddly enough, in microeconomics, which you wouldn't think. But
Consumer price driven, right?
correct,
Yeah.
yeah. So what's the impact on a single item if a tariff is put into place? Who absorbs that cost? So very pertinent to the news of the day right now. But yeah, I think we could fill those pieces in.
So if we went down the 7-year path, obviously for a small, say 10% increase in price, that gives us the flexibility to keep it for that period of time, but would give us the option to do something new in the interim. I'm just curious, Mr. Millard, do you have grading experience on either macro or micro?
In all these years, I've never gone.
Okay. Do we have other teachers who have?
Yeah, our teacher at South went last summer to the AP Institute, and we are encouraging all 3 to go this summer if they are available during that time.
Now, I've done an institute, but I've never been a scorer.
Okay.
On the top.
That was, well, so you've done the training, you just
Yes.
haven't been scoring, okay. I think that's important too. I think whenever we have an opportunity to have our teachers engaged in that, then they can help prepare the students for what's to come. Thanks for allowing me to ask my questions with an active motion. Like I said, I don't oppose adopting this book. I just think we just need to be conscious of the fact that, it's kind of an insurance policy to keep it for 7 years, but I don't know that, I don't know, maybe you'll come back in 3 or 4 and tell us we want something different. All right. Anybody else with comments or questions? Mr. Zenobia?
Thank you. I think it looks good. What I do notice and appreciate, we've had, with all the AP courses, come back and tell us how the books are now aligning more with the tests. And I think if we're going to have AP classes, that is important. So I do appreciate that. I think the book looks great. I'm glad we still have economics. You know, we had discussion that maybe that wasn't going to be the case. But I think it's extremely important. So I did like the book, and I think we got a great program there. So appreciate everyone's work on it.
And just, I want to add an increased enrollment for next year.
Awesome. All right, I'm not seeing any more comments, so was moved by Mrs. Kozlowski and seconded by Mrs. Koenig. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. We'll take it to the full board next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
All right, our last topic tonight, we welcome our middle school principals to discuss the middle school schedule.
All right. Thank you so much for giving us a few minutes just to transition between our teams. I'm definitely going from high school to middle school, so we just needed a few minutes to switch over. So tonight I'm bringing forward the topic of the middle school schedule for discussion. I'm here with Dee Garcia, who is the Director of Teaching and Learning at the middle school level and bilingual, Rob Bennett, principal at Les Paul, and then Kent Kleinowski, who's principal at Horning Middle School, and Laura Gennaro, principal at Butler. So tonight, what we are here to do is to share some information with you and really have a conversation around our current state of our schedule, and then also some possible ideas and next steps moving forward. So what you see here are the teaching and learning priorities. As I was coming into the role of teaching and learning, the district had already began to significantly invest in our adopting of curriculum resources. And so this automatically has been a resource or a priority for teaching and learning throughout our district. In addition, what we've articulated is that in addition to having a curriculum scope and or curriculum resource, we wanted to have a clearly articulated scope and sequence, and we want to identify essential standards, and we want to always continue to focus on our instructional practices. What you see here at the bottom of the slide is some of those foundational resources that we've been using. So over on the right is the book Better Learning. This has been used through the last several years to really guide our work around gradual release. In the middle you'll see an image around Blackboard. We've been using Blackboard in our system to really house our curricular content for parents to have access as well as students. These are all things that will just continue regardless of the schedule, but they've also been foundational resources to help guide our thinking around the schedule. One of the books I want to point out is on the left, the Taking Action book. This is a newer foundational resource that we've been studying as an admin team and then now as school leadership teams to really enhance our thinking around reimagining meeting the needs of all learners. Really what is looking at Tier 1 and what's happening there and going beyond that to ensure we have structures in place to support students who are struggling and students who are also ready for further enrichment opportunities. So these are foundational pieces that we'll continue to use, and these teaching and learning priorities are not new, and they will continue to be used and articulated throughout our system as we end this school year and even as we launch the next school year. This same team had some conversations and discussions around the high school schedule. And as you know, this year we went forward with a block schedule, looking at a 4-period day. And this timeline really articulates just a recap of what that process looked like, starting at evaluating alternative schedules, weighing pros and cons to alternative schedules, collecting input from teachers, parents, and students. And then even fast forwarding to visiting sites and even having a pilot week or a practice week of that newer schedule prior to full implementation. Here's what the schedule looks like, and I wanted to share a couple of the lessons learned from the work of that high school team. So first and foremost, the team found it beneficial to learn from other districts, the students and staff who were implementing a schedule very similar to this. And like I said, having that practice week was another great valuable piece that has helped in the implementation for the high school schedule. Since implementing the high school schedule, we've heard lots of positive feedback around, from the teacher perspective, allowing their instructional time to be used to go deeper into that content and learning with students. And then also positive feedback from the students of having less subjects in one day and having fewer transitions. We've also seen some benefits of just student behavior in the hallway with fewer transitions. We went from 6, down to just a few in one day. So I bring this forward because we as a middle school team have taken a lot of these lessons learned from the high school and applied them to our process and what the information that we're going to share here today. So before we get into the nitty-gritty, I really wanted to first start and talk about our why. And our why is always driven with our district mission along with our key performance indicators. Here, our biggest reason for coming forward around this and having a conversation around the middle school schedule is our student results and outcomes. Here are 2 charts that show our student performance in English language arts as well as mathematics. And while you can see in the last year it did go up despite changes in testing and proficiency levels in language. But the reality is we would like to see that further increase. And so that is our main reason for coming forward, is really jumping into the why in our student outcomes and that being the driver as we move forward. I'll speak to another few pieces of our why, and that is really meeting the needs of all learners. And what we've done is we've researched our current state, and we'll be sharing a little bit about that. But what I've come to learn is that in 8th grade, our students have minimal time in math compared to what is required to establish that those strong lessons that are recommended from the scope and sequence of the curriculum resources that we've purchased. And so the team will walk you through what it looks like for the amount of time in literacy, math, science, social studies, and electives, and what that looks like. And so I really want to bring forward the conversation around how are we spending our time in each day for instructional reasons when our core priorities go back to those curriculum resources as well as those literacy foundational skills and mathematics as those foundational blocks as students move forward. We also want to provide student support and enrichment opportunities beyond Tier 1. When Melissa Yao was up here talking about the retention and promotion policy, she had talked about at the middle school or at the elementary level how there's time for staff and students to engage in providing additional supports as well as enrichment opportunities. So that is part of the reason that we're bringing this schedule as a topic tonight in the whole big picture. The other piece that we want to entertain is the idea of establishing pathways for our electives. And one of the pieces that we'll share tonight is our current electives and how many different ways they are offered and how many different subject areas we have electives in and how that compares to other districts around us or similar to size. I want to be real and recognize that the middle school schedule is probably not something you haven't heard about or haven't been a part of conversations of in the past. And the reality is that we've had teams working on this in the past, and we've had many historical attempts along the way. And so what I wanted to do is have Rob Bennett share a little bit more about the historical perspective so that you can see the different evolutions that we've had, the different conversations. So he'll be summarizing that as part of our why, of why we're here tonight to bring forward the idea of looking at potentially different middle school schedules. After Rob talks about the historical perspective, we'll get into sharing information about our current schedule and elective information. And then the group is going to talk about the team itself and how the process that they've been taking to come to a recommendation to bring forward 2 possible schedules that we could talk about tonight, along with additional elective information.
All right, thank you, Jen. As you see on the screen, there are really 9 different checkpoints along the way over the course of the last 14 to 15 years of what our middle school schedule has looked like. Going back to 2011, for some people that may not have a connection to the district for that long, or children who've gone through the different iterations of a middle school schedule, 2011 is when we introduced 6th graders to the middle school. Prior to that time, they were at the elementary, and 7th and 8th graders were the only middle schoolers. If you want to go even further back, there was a time 7th, 8th, and 9th graders were in middle school. But in 2015, there was some revision to the middle school schedule. There were different schedules within buildings for the different grades based on 6th graders coming in, new transitions, how are we going to work through that with those students, and then the differing schedules for grade 7 and 8. Along the way, we created common schedules for all students in grades 6 through 8. That occurred in 2016, going away from 3 different schedules within a building to a common bell schedule. In the spring of 2018, again, we wanted to make some more adjustments in this continuous improvement cycle. What could we do to meet the needs of all of our students? And we made an adjustment to the grade 6 elective experience. That was a time moving away from 6 different electives throughout the course of a school year to elongated time in different content areas for their elective experience. At that time, too, in the fall, we had outside consultants come in, some ongoing research, neighboring school districts, neighboring states. What did schedules look like? What were opportunities to be able to build in? You might have heard skinnies or longer class periods and all different iterations of what a middle school schedule could look like. From there, data analysis was used in achievements, time spent on task, time in classes, times in courses, what were student achievement rates. At that time, decisions were made, and then in 2020, allocation of minutes in grades 6 and 7 in literacy and math increased. At that time, we're going from a single period to the double period of math and literacy for grades 6 and 7, and we were able to also accomplish that in grade 8. But there was a pause when that came to math, what was going to happen for grade 8 math. And we may not want to remember, 2020 also was a pretty tumultuous time. Some of those conversations were put on pause, which has brought us to this past year, 2023 as well, when we brought in advisory to the middle level. All 3 of our buildings have an advisory structure. Homeroom, you may know it as, to be able to meet needs of students, but that's a small period of time that we all have in our schedules throughout the day. Which leads us to today, our current work. This has been ongoing for several months, and later on in the presentation, time of that work, and also who's been participants within that work.
We wanted to start out by just defining some key terms as we go through the schedule so that everyone's on the same page. So when we talk about core subjects, we're talking about math, science, literacy, and social studies. When we talk about elective subjects, we're talking about all the other courses, whether required or not. And then when we talk homeroom, it's the same as our advisory, similar to that. And, just so you're aware, that's that 30-minute block of time that we're going to get into what that can actually look like. So the current schedule, if you look at this is just one example of each grade level's current schedule. And you can see, I wanted to draw your attention that the time allocated to the core classes, which are math, literacy, science, and social studies, are all on there. You can see that we have consistency among all grade levels in literacy, science, and social studies. In our current schedule, we clearly value literacy education. There's a literacy block in each grade level, 6, 7, and 8, so that students get 86 minutes of daily instruction, and that includes reading, writing, vocabulary, listening, and speaking. When we look at science and social studies, each grade level gets 43 minutes. And then the consistency ends there. There's some discrepancy, if you can see, between grades 6 and 7 and 8 regarding math instructional minutes. So in our current schedule, both grades 6 and 7 have the math block of 86 minutes, and you can see in 8th grade, they only have a 43-minute math period. So while there is the discrepancy in the minutes allocated to math, the math curriculum that has been adopted at all 3 grades is consistent. And the barrier that we face is that Desmos, which is the board-approved curriculum, requires 45 to 60 minutes to deliver with fidelity. The lack of consistency with the time allocation is providing some challenges. The other piece that you can see is the elective periods also differ between 6th and 7th and 8th grade, where the 6th and 7th graders have 2 periods totaling 86 minutes, where the 8th grade has 3 periods totaling 126 minutes a day.
I would just add for the 8th grade math time, if a student is in 8th grade math, they have that. If a student is also taking an accelerated math class, it is the same amount of time.
Correct.
And those are some of the classes that they get high school credit for.
Okay, and so electives are offered in a variety of different ways in the either 2-period or 3-period model. One of them is that electives would be offered year-long every day. We're also scheduling year-long every other day, also scheduling semester every day, and quarter-long every day. So there's 4 different models of how students might be engaging with the electives. The departments that we have in our school district that offer electives include those that are in the list that you see there: art, AVID, business, family and consumer education, music, Phi-Ed, tech ed, and world language. Those that have the highlight or the bolded letters are required in 1 or more of the grade levels in the middle schools, and we'll get a little bit into that in just a moment.
All right, so in front of you and on the screen right now is the total amount of elective offerings that we currently have in all 3 of our middle schools. As you can see through here, one of the things I do want to note is that anything with an asterisk means that that is a required course or class through state statute. So that's where we're meeting something that's super important that all kids need to take. So what I really want to walk you through, because there's a lot here, is let's just focus on art for a second and look at what the current state of art would be for the middle schools. So if you look at it, all 6th graders must take art. That is a part of a state statute. That one's pretty straightforward. So where it gets interesting, though, is in 7th and 8th grade. So right now we have 4 current art classes. You can see what those are with metals and ceramics, drawing, and digital art. And so those can be taken really in any order at any times. So while that sounds great, one of the big issues that we have then is making sure that the classes can all run. And so oftentimes we'll have students pick these things, and we do run into some issues when it comes to making sure that they can run. One of the things that we did look at when we looked at other schools is just the amount of elective classes being offered, and we are far above in terms of just the courses that are on offer and the hours of the day that are also offered. So when we go through this process, what you're going to see is that we've engaged in a process to kind of look through these things with our time commitments and priorities, and where we kind of lead this to later is what Jen had talked about before, is looking at pathways where we can still do these things just in a different way. And so we'll get to that with pathways in a little bit.
Thank you, Kent. So in considering what you've learned so far, we wanted to really take advantage of the fact that we have an approved curriculum and curriculum resource. This is the first time where we've had a resource that we can really effectively implement with fidelity, and it began to spur our inquiry into how to ensure that all students can get access to and succeed in the curriculum. At the time, this was in the winter, spring of 2024, we began to read a text called Taking Action, which really presented to us a structure and a way of approaching the opportunity that students would get grade level instruction, and then they would also get the support that they needed to get to grade level, as well as deeper support should that be needed. We began to entertain and look back at the history that Rob
knows, some of you have the pleasure of knowing as well, we went through that really deeply last summer so that Laura and Kent had the opportunity to understand like the walk that we've made and some of the potholes we've fallen into. We did take some time to study the high school process and what were the benefits of their process, where did they excel, and how did they get the job done so effectively. And we also began to really look at the regional approaches to middle school scheduling and middle school electives and middle school extension and intervention for students that are above grade level and students that are approximating grade level. In our learning, we learned that we do have some instructional time considerations that we do need to consider. And then we do have quite a few electives, maybe more than most would offer. And in that, it informed our opportunity to move through the fall. In the fall, we began our inquiry really into the regional successes. Where are school districts who have really taken a look at how they're using time to support teacher preparation, teacher collaboration, and offering students additional supports to be able to meet standards? How are they doing? We did a nice audit of that process and actually had an opportunity to visit a site that has made pretty significant increases in achievement with a high-performing population of students. We began to continue our ongoing learning around taking action and integrate our strategic leadership teams at schools, or our school leadership teams, in reading of that text and understanding what we're talking about when we say all students need to be able to find success in universal instruction. And then we began to collaborate with the Student Services Department around our inquiry into the minutes that we have currently offered in our school day to see if there was any wiggle room or any opportunity to extend the school day beyond the current minutes that we have allocated. Going into the winter, Jen and I collaborated on doing a couple of Explorer posts to our middle school staff to begin to lay the groundwork and set the table for a shift in priorities and a shift in perspective. Our teams at the buildings were continuing to do this work, reading the Taking Action book and doing some professional learning in their buildings. But we were really in preparation for the Winter Institute, whereby we had a pretty big strategic conversation around middle school achievement, middle school growth, and the structures that may or may not be in place to support our teachers to do the work that they desperately want to do with kids. We built a team of teachers across all 3 sites, across all departments, to help us and to help inform us with their input on the decisions that we were making and the research and supports we were putting into place. That team developed a set of criteria that we would be using to evaluate the potential schedules that we'd be looking at, and we sought input from our teachers through Winter Institute on those. Through the spring, we've really focused our efforts on developing that middle school team across the 3 buildings. And making sure that we were really clear in our communication with them so that they could be clear in communication with colleagues. We're happy to say that you probably haven't heard much about middle school scheduling because things are feeling good. We did get a lot of input from them, and we will be planning input with our staff coming up May 19th. And then from there, pending board approval, we would put an action plan into place to do much of what the high school did, which was to think about how to build capacity in systems over the year of 25-26 so that we are ready for implementation in 26-27 with minimal revision or hiccups. So that's where we have started. As you can see on the next slide,
I do want to just jump in, though, and share that with this whole process, we, again, just stress that we're here tonight for discussion, really have conversation about the process that we've been taking and 2 possible schedules that we're looking at. I also want to say that we know and understand that student achievement does not just go up with a schedule change. There's other things that other strategies that have to be put in place, and that's where a more broader plan and approach, we would take that. But I just want to stress that the schedule is part of something that we're looking at to help us along the way.
So the middle school team that we assembled is comprised of the following types of educators. We have administrators, including administrators from student services. We have special education and ESL teachers serving on this team. There are literacy teachers, science, math, music, tech ed, and business, and a school psychologist that serves on this team. They represent all 3 buildings and all departments within each of those buildings. That team developed some key criteria that we're looking at, and as Jen said, it's not just how we use time, it's what we do with the time that we have. And we had them identify a schedule structure that allows teachers in the district to be able to accomplish a couple of things. First of all, the execution of a guaranteed viable curriculum that we have invested in with sufficient instructional time to do so. The second is an opportunity for students to receive additional supports and enrichment opportunities towards proficiency and or beyond it to mastery. The next thing that we looked at was identifying a schedule structure that really allowed for our students to be able to have an experience with their electives that set them up for later experiences in high school where they have to be more selective. They have to see themselves and be knowledgeable in a variety of elective experiences in order to make knowledgeable decisions. From our process, our team felt comfortable with and support two schedules that we'll bring to you tonight for further review. These schedules come from the National Middle School Association and are two of four that we looked at as an administrative team before bringing three of those to our team, and they whittled it down to two. Laura and Rob, go ahead.
I do want to point out too, the emphasis on that AB day. In looking at a schedule, we knew it had to work with the high school schedule. We enter in to staffing conversations this time of year where we have principals in the room and they need 2/12 and 6/12 of this person, and we're trying to organize how that person is going from one school to the next if they have to travel. And so going into looking at the schedules, we wanted to ensure that any schedules that we really wanted to learn more about worked with that high school schedule.
Okay, so I'll start with Schedule A. This was one of the schedules we looked at, a modified block, which would be an 8-period day. It includes 2 blocks of 89 minutes and 4 learning periods of 43 minutes each, 2 of which are electives. So this schedule requires us to consider the following. It provides a consistent math block of 86 minutes in grades 6 through 8, which is an increase of 43 minutes in 8th grade math instruction, which would allow for delivery of our guaranteed and viable curriculum, thereby improving student outcomes. Additional time at the beginning of the school day is also a consideration, which would be necessary to allow for 30 minutes of homeroom every day, because right now our current homeroom structure is about 20 minutes, so it would extend it by 10 minutes. And the reason for this is it's a building-wide structure that would involve all hands on deck, all staff. It's an approach that would allow for strategic grouping to meet the needs of all learners and put our strongest educators with our neediest students and be able to really create some great partnerships in learning. And again, improving student outcomes. This would be possible if we would begin at 7:20, which is 10 minutes earlier than our current 7:30 start time. The other piece that is a consideration is that the schedule provides us with consistent elective periods in grades 6 through 8, which is a reduction of the 3 in 8th grade to 2. So every grade level would have 2 elective periods. And then Rob will take the next one.
A second viable option is a 6-period day, which we would start at 7:30, which is our current start time. This, you would see, would be balancing instructional time across all of the periods. Each period would be 57 minutes. 4 of those are the core areas of literacy, math, social studies, and science. But the electives would also then be 57 minutes. So this balances all 6 of those periods. What it does in this is also extend our homeroom and advisory time from our current structure. It adds nearly 13 more minutes to our advisory period, which, like Laura stated, this provides an all-hands-on-deck, a system across the entire building that can help us support the needs of various learners, and all of our teachers are on deck, allowing us to be very flexible in our scheduling during that time to provide high-quality teachers in areas that are needed, making sure our teachers are in their zones of perfection, so to speak, to be able to do the best by students. This building-wide structure involves all of our staff. What it does allow us some flexibility with scheduling, as Jen had alluded to. But this structure doesn't require an alteration to the start of the school day. We would still stay at that 7:30 beginning time and the 2:36 end time. The idea, too, is this 57-minute structure does allow us to deliver our curriculum with the fidelity it's intended to. So it's meeting those needs by extending our class periods by additional minutes.
So in putting both the modified block and the 6-period day side by side, there are just a few differences that we'd like you to remember as we move forward. The first is that the modified block would require us to start the school day about 10 minutes earlier. Due to the way that we transport students in the district, it was not possible to add 10 minutes to the end of the day. The beginning of the day was the only possible opportunity. The modified block schedule offers literacy and math blocks of 86 minutes. All other periods would be 43 minutes, as opposed to the 6-period day, which just starts at the same time middle school has always started at, 7:30 a.m. And each content area, including electives, would be 57 minutes in length. Both of them meet our criteria set forth by our committee, that we would have sufficient time to deliver our guaranteed curriculum with additional supports and extensions every day of the week through our homeroom. In addition to that, we would be offering 2 elective periods, although through the A-Day, B-Day pathway approach, students would be able to take multiple electives every other day. The multiple approaches that we currently have, remember, we have year-long every day, year-long every other day, semester-long every day, and quarter-long every day. We'd like to have a streamlined approach that just utilizes the every other day or the A-Day, B-Day elective, which would mean we would run some electives all year, A-Day and B-Day, or A-Day or B-Day, and then some electives would run only for a semester on A-Day or B-Day. We have many, many choices in our electives, and what we would like to do is propose a way for students to get maximum access to those electives through a pathway option.
All right, so with the pathway option that we're looking at, I'm going to walk you through a little bit about 6th grade first, and then we'll go back to art because that was our starting point. So the 6th grade, what we would like to consider is really an opportunity for exposure and experience to all of our elective areas through a wheel type format. So it would still meet all the required classes that we have to do by state statute, but then all the different electives that we have, students would get that exposure to. And one of the purposes for that would also be is to help inform our students when they're picking like, hey, what am I going to take in 7th grade? What am I going to take in 8th grade? And really in high school. So what that would look like then afterwards, and if we look at the art piece here, so what you can see up there is Art 7, it says. And so what that would be is really what we'd be working with the art educators with is merging, let's say, metals and digital art into the art class. So it's not going anywhere, it's just living in this new spot, and it kind of connects it in there. The other piece would be is that there wouldn't be a thing where like you're stuck into that for the following year. There's no prereqs. So let's say you go into art, you're in your art for that piece of time. That doesn't mean in 8th grade you're continuing to take art, just like if you were into a different class in 7th grade, that doesn't mean you could jump into art the next year. So 6th grade you would get all those exposures, and then in 7th and 8th grade it would just be modularized into that semester piece for the year so that they would be getting. Again, the big piece just to know is that there's no prerequisite, so it'd be able to move through those things with different years, with 6th grade allowing for the extra exposures. So that really does align with our KPIs and just reflecting with our time allocation and to make things more efficient and clear.
I think this piece also helps students to experience a variety of things and then maybe focus in a little bit more at high school rather than focusing in on one avenue within art or any other department at the middle school level. So exposing them to a much more variety at the middle school level prior to high school. The pathways down below, you can see the other departments that aren't required. So given some conversation tonight and additional work with the team, we'd have to have continued work around looking at what these departments look like and how that all fits together within that A-B day schedule, and going with looking at all that within the semester-long or year-long opportunities. So that would be work that needs to be done.
Okay, and as we wrap up tonight, we just wanted to reorient you again to the look-fors in a schedule or the criteria that our team has crafted. Also to thank our teachers who have come to the table over these winter months to help us to build this proposal in this recommendation tonight to bring it for your information. The criteria being that we really need to ensure that we've got the time and instructional support to be able to deliver our guaranteed viable curriculum to all students and ensure that those students are successful in interacting with the skills in their grade level with the supports that they need to catch up if needed and/or accelerate. We believe that the structure with the AB electives, when added to this criteria, offers us the greatest opportunity for both instruction and impact in meeting our key performance indicators. So on the next slide, we'd like to just present to you kind of where we're going next. We will have a middle school team meeting on Thursday with our whole scheduling team in preparation for their delivery of this information to their staff on May 19th. With the purpose of garnering input by school and by department. We will use that input to revise any communications or recommendations going forward as we continue to take steps to refine our elective pathways and the other issues that might come up through the input process. We are hoping to involve our parent and community later this month, the week of May 19th approximately. All three middle schools have community and parent inquiry nights scheduled, and then we're hoping to return to you based on your recommendations with the information required to continue the conversation.
So with that, there's lots of information, lots of discussion, but again, really going back to those priorities for teaching and learning and just looking at just the current state and possibilities moving forward.
Questions? Mrs. Koenig.
I was just wondering, thank you, this is quite the undertaking, and it was a walk down memory lane, looking at everything from 2011, because I lived most of that. I think you mentioned you visited Cedarburg, correct?
We did.
Which of the schedules that were presented closely mirrors what they do?
They, what mirrors what they do is they have a guaranteed 30-minute homeroom every day. That's the thing that we were most wanting to examine is what is happening during that time, and what's been the impact on student achievement, and what is everybody else doing? They have a modified block, which would be that Schedule A that you looked at. However, this could be accomplished in a variety of ways. They just happen to have chosen that one.
Okay, great. And then just one more question. So presently, or what you're thinking in that 30-minute block, that homeroom advisory, what will go on in there? What does that look like for the students?
Well, I can answer that by saying that right now we have an advisory structure where there are career and college planning lessons happening at that time. There is social, emotional, and team building exercises happening at that time. There are also lessons in AVID for school-wide AVID to support the structures and routines that all students need to be using in the school. I think as part of our process, we will have to think about what the structure is going to look like as we move into the fall months to recreate that. We know that success with that time is very critical for all learners, and there are probably more ideas than just my own on this one.
And currently, the time block allocated is 20 minutes, so it's challenging, even in whatever the topics are, to get through a lesson in that time, and so that's where these moving forward have a few more minutes.
Yeah, I was just wondering, because I do remember, the advisory period, back when I was in the classroom, and it was often times a hit or miss of what was being covered in there, what was relevant to some students. It was really not, I guess, beneficial for others. It was kind of a hit or miss. So if we're increasing it to 30 minutes, I'm just wondering what, I want to make sure we're using those extra, even though it's 10 minutes. I want to make sure that those 30 minutes are definitely beneficial to every student in meeting the needs individually of what those students' needs, rather than just a blanket, we're going to do this today, we're going to talk about this today, and that might not apply or, interest or be of benefit to all students. So if we're increasing that time, I just want to really look into that a little bit and see how that could benefit all students every day, if that's part of their built-in schedule.
To speak to it a little bit, all three of us have really come up with an advisory calendar that we're very, I won't say we are Loctite exactly day-to-day, minute-by-minute in that advisory, but we're very close on the high topics that we need to cover and want to cover. It's also a credit to our staff who've utilized different resources we have to gain data on where students are performing, and how can we then use that data during that time to then enhance what's happening in small group instruction, what that might look like. We've also been able to utilize times when it's been map assessment time, forward assessment time, getting students ready for those high-stakes experiences so that they can go into those to the best of their possibility. We have dabbled right now in some flexibility of what could it look like by moving groups to different areas or with different people for different instructional pieces with some wins, but it's also some logistics to make sure we can navigate it school-wide. Everyone hands on deck, as Laura has spoken to, and by able to have that common time, which is extended, would even increase the impact that we're currently seeing right now. But you said it, making sure that those minutes are of high quality, high instruction every single day. It's going to be 150 minutes a week.
Right.
That we can have an impact greater than we're currently having, and the staff are ready to take that on and to do it with the best of their abilities.
And then just one more.
If I could just add to that a little bit too. We've talked a lot about students needing like reteaching opportunities or pre-teaching opportunities to be successful in the classroom. And we've been working really hard with our teams to analyze data of assessments and then make sure that we're addressing that. In a blocked schedule with math and literacy, there's extra time a lot of times, even with the curriculum, that they can do small groups within that time. And with the shorter classes, you don't have that. So having a 30-minute time with all hands on deck, exactly what kids need, gives us the flexibility to address math concerns twice a week, literacy concerns twice a week, or maybe science concerns, social studies, whatever it is. But everyone is available to be able to do what is needed. And so it'll look way different than what we currently do.
Sure, okay. And then just one final question. When it comes to what's covered, the content in that 150 minutes, is that something that's decided through administration, through the district, or does each school dictate or kind of decide we're going to work on this during that time? Or are there state mandates? I guess what is used to just, organize what you're going to cover?
In the middle level, we are utilizing our Navigate 360 curriculum, Compass curriculum. So those lessons, there are 32 different lessons that are delivered throughout the course of the year, as well as our academic and career planning, as well as digital citizenship. So those things that are required to the district are being brought into those classes during those times. We then also use Fridays for parent communication from students to their parents about how they're doing, how they're achieving in their classes. If they have missing work, what is their plan to accomplish it? And then also work on executive functioning through the AVID process, organization, note-taking, synthesizing notes. So pretty rigid in all reality of what is taking place. And it's something that students really miss if we don't have an opportunity to use it because of a unique testing schedule day when advisory then goes away.
Thank you.
Carrie. This is a lot, and it's a tremendous amount of work, and I'm grateful that you guys are doing it. I think there's a tremendous amount of value when I really take a look at what we're trying to accomplish through all of the different variations. It's really the elective versus the content areas. And when I take a look at what our focus is on and achievement and looking at where our proficiency is and saying that we need to be on the fundamental content areas, and we want to also offer and expose our students to a wide variety of things. And so when I hear us talking about by offering elective courses in a way that I think bundle experiences for our students and expose them to a wider range of opportunities or skills or things without having to narrow down into one thing. And Kent, I think you had mentioned it, when we get to arts, when you offer so many different variations, you're not going to necessarily get the student class size to fill because of the unique interests versus I'm going to expose my broad student population to a wide range of art, which is only going to expose them to opportunities and things that they may not know and may not like, and set them up for the high school experience. I'm a big fan of the block schedule. I think obviously the high school thing. I also understand that there's a lot of the transitions, you hear about parents talk about transitions in the learning. So you're going from elementary to middle and to high school. And similar to what we've done with curriculum, that I've made it the same no matter what school I'm at, by trying to set up a program that is effectively creating a similar unique structure across the full board, is actually preparing our students for consistency, stable, and understanding where that goes, but also making sure that we're putting the focus where it needs to be, which is on the core content areas. I'm looking at the schedules. I wouldn't know which one to pick. I think this is where we look to your teams to say what is the most effective, and how that is going to work. I'll be interested to see what the parents say who are wrangling their kids to get them out the door as is. But, 10 minutes, I'm like, oh, it's 10 minutes. I'm like, have you met my child? It's like, but I like seeing the variations that we have and where we're trying to get. Yeah, I think I'm gonna also read the book Taking Action now that you guys have talked about it so much. So, this is really exciting to hear and see as to the progress that we're going and how we're thinking about the approach. I like it a lot.
Thank you.
I need clarification. Could we go to the slide that says Schedule A, modified block? Aside from the 7:20 start time for this, how is this different from the current 6th or 7th grade schedule?
The
It's
homeroom is
essentially
an
the same.
additional 10 minutes. Yeah.
It's exactly the same.
Except for the additional 10 minutes of homeroom.
So it's not really different.
It-
We're already doing a modified block.
Advisory is additional, and also the consistency of math across 6 through 8. Right now, there's the discrepancy in 6 and 7 compared to 8. So
And the-
this gives equal balance, math and literacy across all grade levels at the mid-level.
Okay. But it's really the same as the 6th and 7th grade schedule we're doing right now.
Approximately,
10-minute.
except the additional
Yeah.
10, yeah.
I'm going to be a hard sell on 10 minutes earlier. I think we already start too early for middle school. I think this is a lot. I think it's a lot for the kids. I think it's a lot for the parents. So we're going to need a really compelling reason. That is, we need these, let's kind of get back to Mrs. Koenig's point, like these 30 minutes are so critical and we know how we're going to spend every one of them. Because, again, I already think that we're out of balance on the start times. And I just think that's a lot. I'm also curious about the lunch. Are they going to be adjusted, or we can't do 700 kids at lunch?
Right, so currently we have 3 lunch periods at the mid-level. So
Okay.
for example, kids are going through hours 1 through 4 in grade 8. They go to lunch, and then they finish their day 5, 6, 7, 8. We have 7th graders who go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, go to lunch, 6, 7, 8. So there's a point in time in the middle of the day, let's say 11:35 to 1:04, that lunch periods would run. So it's just shifting those.
Leading into the elective
Yes.
blocks? Okay.
Yes. Or, for example, that could be, that elective box might be math for grade 6, might be math for grade 7. So it's where we place it in that structure allows us to have those 3 different lunch periods, which currently, and we would like to keep as grade-specific lunches.
When I think block and I think AB day block, I think every other day, I'm using this block of 90 minutes to do something different. So I'm alternating in science or social studies or my electives. But what we're looking at is like the block includes 2 electives. So how does the AB part jive with the high school pieces?
The AB part would be, at the middle school level, would really speak to the electives. And so then when high school and middle school is all on an A day, first, and we all have electives that are either semester or year-long. When we're doing staffing, we could have a staff member who's at Horning on A days, teaching Art 6, 7, 8. And then on B days, they're at South, teaching art classes to high school. What we have so
So is this a 4 electives at a time piece? I got 2 electives, 2 43-minute elective periods in the day.
That's correct.
And an A and B, you're taking 4 electives at a time.
If
The
they're in
whole
sixth
year.
grade, no. If they're in sixth grade, it would be 4 electives at a time for a semester, and then the next semester, we would swap out 2 of the electives for new content. For the 7th and 8th grade students, they would be taking 4 consistent electives the entire year.
So 4 electives, science, social studies, math, literacy, and
I had-
homeroom simultaneously. And right now, they're taking 2 electives per semester. Or you still have the quarter electives, so they're swapping.
There are multiple variations, so some are, yeah, so that's where the uniquenesses come up. There are courses that are offered semester, which would be A day, B day over the course of a year. Or some, in some instances, are strictly 1 semester every day. And then there are courses that are year-long every day, like our world language courses, or Band 8 is every day in 8th grade, where in 7th grade and 6th grade, they're every other day. So the intricacies of middle schools, we are truly in the middle of everything for everyone in trying to bring a structure and system that aligns to what we're trying to do across the system.
I sense that there's no real, there's no ideal situation, right? There's a lot to do. It's an interesting age, so you want to keep kids busy, but I think also the opportunity to focus. So I'm just not sure that I'm seeing like the huge benefit to what we're calling a block schedule when it's so, outside of the 8th grade piece, when it's so similar to what we're currently doing. I do think that the narrowing of electives is important. I think we have a lot. I've brought this up before, but I think that, kind of forcing students into a language in a 6th, 7th grade language that they're not choosing is not really helpful. I am curious on the art piece because I know that there are a couple of art classes that are pretty popular. So if art, metal, and jewelry and ceramics, I'll just make this up, becomes art 7, but I want to take art in 7th grade, but I'm an 8th grader, can I take art 7 or do I have to take art 8?
Yeah, so that's where no matter what, there's some tough choices that would have to be made. So yes, that would be where 7 would have, these would be the specific classes that are offered, and then 8, these are the specific classes that, what those are to be decided, but yes, so those would be in
So
there.
they'd know that going in, like I better take it.
Absolutely,
7th
and
grade,
that's
yeah.
part of why with the proposal with the wheel piece, they would get some exposure to all those things as 6th graders, and then in 7th and 8th grade, that's where it's kind of like, hey, now's the time you have to start making some hard choices, and then we also have them, we do have them rank everything, and we do the best we can with locking them in, and again, there's still on-ramps. The on-ramp would be as the following year, there's also an on-ramp in high school, so there's plenty of those pieces there, but we want to get them that knowledge base as 6th graders to make some decisions.
Okay. I'm probably a little bit still too close to it, so we're still in middle school recovery mode over at my house. So yeah, there's a lot, and I appreciate the attention to all the details that kind of go into making the schedules work. I think the fewer electives just makes it easier to make the schedules flow, and it makes it easier to plan. I also think Mrs. Gennerman alluded to, those students who are taking high school level classes. I think the longer periods are an advantage, especially the biology, math, world language, right? Those are the 3 that we cross over, which kind of favors the Schedule B. Because in A, you get the bigger math block, but the science and the language actually falls into that shorter elective block, if I'm not mistaken.
It does, except that biology is offered every day, so the instructional minutes over the course of a year would be equivalent to what is being offered at the high school. Although it's not in a 90-minute block, they do experience 43 minutes each day of the week.
Okay, so how does that help with the AB, with the high school teachers shifting?
The AB is really primarily around the electives.
Okay,
So for like a sixth grader, they're going to have math every day, literacy every day. But when it comes to electives, right now, we are, in my mind, when I look at this, year-long daily, year-long every other day, I'm drawing a line from every one of those to every department. And seeing this web of scheduling and opportunities where then we don't have classes that are filled. And so the idea would be that if we can move electives to being every other day, then the elective piece with staffing will align with high school staffing as much as possible and if needed.
Right.
or from middle school to middle school?
Yes.
Yes. The other thing just to know is like we typically, and I don't think we have in my 3 years here, shared core content teachers. It's really the electives that are ones that are going from building to building. So that's where like it's really core on that elective piece because the core content, we are not sharing staff members.
But right now, when we have one class that maybe is offered for the quarter daily, they're out of the mix in any, then it's just they're at that school, it's just, it makes it very complex to have all these different scheduling formats and all these different departments. And that's where the AB comes in with the alignment to the high school and each other.
And a really simple example would be like sharing a world language teacher. So we share a French teacher, so we have to determine when the French classes are offered at our building and when the French classes are offered at his building. We have to make sure they have time to travel. What that does though is it like pigeonholes us too. So like it doesn't give us the flexibility that we may need or that may help students access courses. It locks them into a limited time frame because we have to make sure that they can get to the other building. If we go to more of an AB structure, it would allow us then to have, for example, our French teacher all day, to be able to schedule her then with the meet the needs of our building, but then also meet the needs of Horning because then on B day, he'd be able to schedule them all day. So those are some of the things we run into when we talk staffing.
Okay. Other questions? Thank you. What do the next steps look like and what do you need from us?
Yeah, so our first step was to get through the presentation, have conversation, get, your thoughts and ideas. There may be something between these two schedules, but what we really wanted to do was just bring the information and the work of the team forward, take your feedback. We're happy to have more conversations or more ideas and brainstorm things. And then work with the team. I think Dee said May 8th, there's another team meeting. And then this month, they'd also be getting input from staff and parents around the two. So really taking that input from you and others and then potentially coming back for more discussion or possibly action. If anything is brought back for potential action, nothing would happen next year. This is all really planning for the following year. And so we want to assure people that that gives us time to plan, prepare, communicate, do all those things, work on that homeroom time, establish those electives and what that looks like. That's why we had some of that pathways to be determined yet. We didn't want to invest all this time in before coming here at this point. So really based on your feedback, we'd continue to collect feedback and ideas and see if, one of these are both viable options from the group, but maybe there's a mixture, based on some of the conversation here tonight, and then based on some of the feedback from teachers too. So ultimately, we'd like to just have more time to work on it. I'm happy to share taking action books with any of you. They're in my office. And then ultimately come back for more conversation and potential action in the future, but that could be next month, that could be August. I think we want to see how some of those next teacher meetings go with the team as well as the larger staff.
I'm assuming you're looking at the data related to how many students are in, choosing different electives and things, and that would be something I'd love to see when you come back and the decisions that you've made about what to prioritize.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. And looking at what those pathways, like the example of art, we just use that as an example because that's what we have. But we may get into it and say, you know what? Art should really cover, oh, I'm not an artist, so art should really cover X, Y, and Z, like.
Everybody's an artist, Jen.
You're right, you're right.
Find your medium.
My point is, we have some flexibility with this discussion. We would have some flexibility of what should be covered. So maybe 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, yes, it's a pathway, but maybe some of the same topics are covered and they're able to go deeper. Or maybe it is different, but we'd have the flexibility and the time to work through with the educators too to develop what that pathway looks like.
It was a very detailed and thorough presentation, so greatly appreciate that. All your time and energy and coordination. You obviously coordinated. All right. Last call. Yeah, thank you very much. All right. Are there any recommendations for future meetings? Not seeing any. That adjourns our meeting for tonight. Our next meeting is right back here in the boardroom at 7 p.m. on Tuesday, June 3rd. Thanks, everybody.